Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Alex Salmond was on BBC Scotland and was being asked some very important and pertinent questions, which he was, of course, quite incapable of answering. One of them was, how many MSPs will he be putting up, or how many MPs will he be putting up, and so forth. And he couldn't give a number, because even he hasn't got a clue. And of course it's expensive trying to run any kind of election campaign, and he hasn't got enough money. He's a busted flush. He's yesterday's man. He's someone who started a party because he needs a salary. And he's got no chance at all of achieving anything. Indeed, the only member he's got in his party at Holyrood had to cross the floor, and the only people he's got in Westminster had to cross the floor. He's never won a single election, and given the polling, he never will. And yet, he's sitting there and calling for a united, Scotland, let's have an independence campaigner in every seat, meaning can some of them please be from his party because he needs the money. What a sad, sad man. But we'll look at this thing now and see why this, I'm going to say failure. He did succeed in the past, but that was then. This is now. He's trying to reinvent himself as the grand old grandfather, whatever. This grand old man of Scottish democracy. And he was no such thing. Let's have a look. So Alex Salmond left flustered amid questioning on unelectable Alba future at Holyrood. Of course they're unelectable. They're just never going to win anything. The polling at best is something like 2%. They're not even going to get onto the lists at that rate. So, he might as well just give it up. But of course he needs the party to exist so people pay their dues so that he can draw a salary, because that's all he's got as income, isn't it? After years of squandering it on exciting times and strippers, no doubt. I have no evidence that that's where he spent his money. Anyway, the former SNP leader appeared confident his party would succeed in the election. However, he refused to announce how many prospective MPs he planned to put forward. This is for the general election, of course. And about 3, because that's all he can afford to run, isn't it? And where will he put them? There's the other thing. Where would you put them? Anyway, Alex Salmond has dodged questions on how many Alba Party members he plans to put forward at the upcoming general election. Asked how many candidates Alba would stand next year, he told BBC Radio Scotland he instead promised a vague, much more widespread intervention. He then said, "It would have been preferable, in my view, if we'd have stood on a Scotland United basis, because that's the only way he's going to have any chance at all. Because in any seat where there is any main party, SNP, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, they will win. Whoever it will be, whichever constituency will win. Alba will get nothing. If they're lucky, like I say, 2, sometimes, who knows, even 3% of the vote. But certainly people who are, shall we say, more independence-minded will mostly vote for the SNP. Of course, the great thing about having Alba there is that there are some independence-minded people who don't want to vote for the SNP. And weirdly, there are people in the SNP who don't want independence. That is quite astonishing as well. So it's a movable feast. But there's no way at all that he's going to get anything. But he might pull a few votes from independence people who don't like the SNP, or at least don't like where the SNP is going, and will use it as a protest. So he might sort of be heartened by the fact that he may get a few extra votes, but certainly won't be enough to get bums on seats at the Westminster. Push for numbers, the party leader sidestepped and told listeners that this would mean standing in as many seats as we credibly can, and for that, read, as many as we can afford to put up, which won't be many. His comments came after Ash Regan became the latest Nat to exit the SNP, this time joining Mr Salmond and offering him the only MSP at Holyrood for his party. Mr Salmond was asked about his party's popularity given its central focus on independence, which has stalled in recent years, and indeed is actually, if anything, going slightly backwards. And the ongoing polling and by-election results that have put Labour as the huge, big opposition to the SNP. A 20% swing in Rutherglen, after all, is not to be sniffed at, and it cannot, of course, be ignored at all. He only repeated his calls for the Yes Alliance, that would join all independence parties together with the goal of winning one pro-independence candidate in every constituency. Well, I have that. It's called the SNP. And so if you do put someone up against the SNP, you may well pull a few independence votes towards Alba, allowing someone like Labour or the Tories to get in and snatch the seat. So carry on, Sergeant. You're doing very, very well. Anyway, he said that this is what he's been offering the SNP over the last year, but it's been rejected. That's because even the idiots in the SNP don't want to align themselves with Alex Salmond, someone who's going to be seen as a bit of a loser, you know. He said, therefore, I think you'll find Albert stands more candidates than otherwise we would have, but we have the obligation now, since we are the only party saying, straightforwardly, if you vote for Alba, you're voting for independence and a mandate for Scottish Government to negotiate that independence. Since we're the only party offering that straightforward proposition, we'll stand in as many seats as we credibly can. And you'll lose every single one. You'll lose your deposits. You'll be made to look foolish. You'll be sitting there at the end of the night, probably even worse off than you are now. In terms of money, definitely, because you'll have spent money on leaflets and campaigning and things like that you're never going to get back. And you're not going to get the money back from having anyone in a seat. Even Ash Regan is probably likely to lose her seat as well. So it is actually quite delicious that he's going for it, isn't it? Anyway, on the issue of numbers that he refused to share, he said, our key target is the next Scottish election, where we have a magnificent opportunity to make a substantial breakthrough, particularly on the list vote. You kid yourself, you're not going to get on the list vote. Not with 2%. My heavens to Betsy. He said, responding to Mr. Salmond's comments, veteran SNP Pete Wishart claimed Albert was unelectable and warned it risked splitting pro-independence votes, which I mentioned. In a social media post, he said, Alex Salmond, confirming on the BBC that his unelectable Alba party will put candidates up at the next general election. The few votes they secure will only help unionist parties seeking to replace SNP MPs. So yes, carry on, Alex. You're doing a fine job. You're splitting that vote. You are marvellous. And of course, with a little bit of tactical voting from people up and down the whole of Scotland, Labour vote Tory, Tory voting Labour. Just not because you're voting for, but we can get an SNP sitting SNP out. Do it, get them out, and destroy them, and you can drive them completely into bankruptcy. And that, of course, will be the biggest win of all. Anyway, there we go. So he's been on there. He won't say how much he's got. He won't say how many he can afford to put up. He won't give any kind of straight answer as to numbers because he literally doesn't have a clue. It all depends on how much money he's got, and you get the impression that it's not a rich party. I wonder what his salary is. Anyway, we'll round that off there. Come up and we'll finish the video. But to be honest, if even Pete Wishart is saying that something's going to fail, and we all know Pete Wishart is, hardly Mr. Reliability, but it's one of the few things where you can actually nod sagely and say, Mr. Wishart, it appeared to be correct. And it isn't often you get to say that. Coming up. So, poor old Alex Salmond. A man who, yes, he led his party. He was the First Minister. Then he was coup d'etat by Sturgeon. Filleted him like a kipper. And he was sort of thrown out. Had to make the best of what he had. What he, of course, did have, to be fair, was complete and utter innocence. He was really, done up. But ever since then, he's been quite bitter, I think. And he's desperately tried to get back into politics, and nobody would have him. So he starts his own party because he needs the money. And he gets a few sort of, shall we say, sympathetic to his cause. And I understand that they are, alternative opinion. I understand he does believe in independence. And of course, there are people out there who are minded toward independence, but who don't like the SNP. And so this does give them an opportunity. But the big picture here is, if he's splitting the nationalist vote, then we've got to encourage him. So, much as, he is actually a terrible man, and he's trying to do this, look, bonhomie, look at me, I am the grand old gentleman of Scottish politics and I'm going to be around. And he was no such thing. He was a bruiser. He was a bit of a bully, a bruiser, sometimes quite obnoxious, sometimes very rude. But I don't think he was a bad man. I don't think he was ever a bad person, and I'll give him that. He's certainly not psychotic like Sturgeon was. But, he's very much yesterday's man now. But, we all need to encourage him. Even the Unionists. The Unionists, we must, guard him. Treat him with respect. Give him everything he can get. Because if he can stand and he can split the nationalist vote, then all power to his elbow. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been an entertaining one. I shall speak to you later. Goodbye.